Welcome to the World Cup Mood Board. Jarrod Kimber here on 99.94. It's weird looking back at it, but in some ways, Sri Lanka came into this tournament more hyped than New Zealand, despite the fact they're in their qualifiers. Although I suppose it's fairly easy for anyone to be more hyped than New Zealand at any stage. But it felt even more stark. Obviously, Sri Lanka had won the Asia Cup, and that was a very good positive. But there was also that they seem to be calling up people off the streets to bowl seam for them. So many injuries have happened. And also, if you look at their recent record, it's patchy. I know I know they won the Asia Cup and they won a lot of games in a row, but they haven't been winning a lot of games in a row for a long time. And so there's absolutely no doubt that, the fact that if you watch them in the qualifiers, they were not a super strong team at the moment. Doesn't mean they couldn't catch fire, and there's certainly a lot of good skill there. But their main strength as a team seems to be two spinners, which is great, and certainly it's handy in Australia. But if it's your main strength in Australia, it's not going to be as explosive as other places are going to be, is it? And if you look at New Zealand in comparison, they have a very well balanced bowling unit, of which everyone is fit as well, which is quite handy. And they also have some good backup bowlers as well. The new ball bowling of Bolt and Southey, of course. And yes, they've lost some players at recent times. Taylor's gone. They've parked Guptill up on a street. And they still have the ability to bring in Phillips and Allen. They've got Conway there, and they've had Mitchell on the bench while he's been recovering as well. You do look at the entire lineup and you do wonder why people were particularly sleeping on this team. But hey, it's New Zealand, so we'll have to get used to that now. It should be pointed out that they did have the tricky group in that I see a lot of people going, well, Pakistan and South Africa and India are in the other group. Yes, that's a very good group. But if you looked at the top three clear favourites coming into this tournament, and I mean clear favourites, it really was Australia, England and India, usually in that order. So to have two of those, the top two in the same group was certainly a bit of a problem. But, now New Zealand are second favourite in the tournament. I think they were maybe third favourite before today, but they've come in again. They're almost not that far away from where India is at the moment, I think. But today was a classic case of them just getting more than they should have when they batted. Especially considering their start, but also considering the wicket. I still don't think this was a particularly easy surface to bat on. I saw the commentators a couple of times were saying that, but only Glenn Phillips looked like actually hitting the ball anywhere, right, on this pitch. So I do think it was a tricky wicket. There was one stage, it was a slow ball that just seemed to roll after it bounced. It's not usually what you would see on a T20 wicket, which is, again, early season Australian cricket wickets, perhaps. But what I find interesting is just how consistently New Zealand seems to match what they do on paper as what they do on the field. So you have another situation where you look at it and you go, this should be the better team. This is what they should be able to do. They should be able to get enough runs to put Sri Lanka under a little bit of pressure, and then their bowlers should be able to clamp down. And that is exactly what happened. Also, this is at least the start of this game was a very good thing for New Zealand because they absolutely thrashed Australia, which is great and obviously brilliant for net run rate and all those sorts of things. However, what they really would have wanted would have been, one game where they had to come back from adversity. And if you look at it kind of twice in this game, once was pure adversity when they lost all the wickets up front. And, could have been bowled out for 120 or something at that point. And the second was, even though they made some runs, they certainly didn't bat Sri Lanka out and they had to, bowl very well. That's much better than what happened in the last game where they won the game basically with the first innings and they were never behind the 8-ball at all. The other interesting thing I find about New Zealand is there's still a couple of things they can do, right? They still have Bracewell on the bench, who could come in for Sodhi, perhaps, spins the ball the opposite way to Mitch Santner, and gives them more batting. And probably a better fielder as well, if we're being honest. And they also have Adam Milne. This is a new ball World Cup so far. Milne should be very good at that as well. New Zealand have only played 2 games so far, but to be fair, they're looking pretty good. All right, let's move on to the man who basically won this game. Not even basically. The man who won this game, Glenn Phillips. He was absolutely something else today. the top order had fallen apart. The pitch was a little bit weird one way, whichever way you look at it. And the spinners were well on top. And Phillips never really consolidated. Even early on when he was struggling to score, he was still trying to get on top of the bowlers at that point. He's just an incredible cricketer. I really think that he's one of those players that, for whatever reason, and part of this is just being a New Zealander, but also because we know him for so many different things, the keeper who then became a spinner and all this sort of stuff, that we haven't quite factored in what Glenn Phillips can be yet. I remember seeing him in the Caribbean in 2018 or 2019, whenever it was I was out there, watching him prepare. He just prepares unlike other cricketers. He's just so focused and so clever and thinks about the game in such a different way than other people and throws himself at all of these things. I just think he was absolutely, I think he's an incredible cricketer. If you just factor this in, he can bat pretty much anywhere 1 to 7, and there really aren't many players who could do that in T20 cricket. Obviously, he was a wicket keeper. Then he takes the gloves off and turns himself into a part-time option. He's a brilliant athlete in the field. He might be, and I can't remember if someone asked me yesterday or the day before, he might be one of the fastest runners between wickets in the world as well. And then on top of all that, he pulls out this one today. So starting like a sprinter. And someone asked me about this on Twitter, I think, recently. I have seen this before in club games. I'm not sure I've ever seen it in a professional game, although perhaps I have. It makes a lot more sense for those of us who are just like, if you don't want to be run out, just stay behind the line. It makes sense from that perspective because you're waiting for the ball to be bowled before you start to run. And from the other perspective as well, it should give you a better momentum than the way that we're currently trying to do it. So again, it just shows how Glenn Phillips is just a little bit different to everyone else in the way that he thinks about the game. So I really like that. But let's just have a look at the runs today. He scored 62% of their runs today. I think he had closer to 70%. If you take extras out, he probably had over 70% for a long period. It was just that he went out towards the end, and there was a couple of good hits. Tim Southey got one away right at the end. Mitch Santner got a 6 away as well. But just incredible to make this many runs on a wicket that didn't look that likely for anyone else. Roger Paxas, probably the only other guy that batted in a good way, and that obviously wasn't for anywhere near as long. But this was after the top order had collapsed. And you have a look at someone like Daryl Mitchell, who spent a lot of time with Phillips. He just didn't look like he was ever going to score at any kind of rate. And to be fair to Mitchell, I just don't think that was a particularly easy wicket. I think Phillips made it look like a great wicket. And if you want more proof that it wasn't an ideal wicket, maybe have a look at Sri Lanka. But I do want to have a look at just a focus on a couple of things here when it comes to his batting. One is just the ability to sort of commit to a ball, and he has all these different moves, and he still has the ability to improvise. So we've just got a video here that I made of him earlier. Batting, he does this forward press across the crease, but as a fake. You can see one here. It's like the batter is pretending to charge or stepping back only to come back into position. But then he can also do this pretend step and then get back into the spot and pick a slow ball like he does here. And he also ends up with a sweep. He's essentially here doing 3 different movements in one delivery. It's remarkable. It's one of these very unique shots that he can play because of how quick he is. But then for fun, shall we have a look at the shots he plays off the spinner, which is really more the kinds of shots you see people play against spinners with a tennis ball and not in a real match consistently. It's the improvisation, striking, and commitment he shows in these that I really love. Plus, these shots are ugly as hell. Yeah, just, it really is a ridiculous shot. The tennis ball thing, I should just go on about that. If you've never played cricket with a cricket ball and with the tennis ball, you need to have played with both to kind of get it. But those sort of shots where he goes back and then sort of just swats them, and the way that he plays them, it's really like when you are playing with a tennis ball, and the way that people especially hit spinners with a tennis ball, because the ball sits up a little bit more. Although in that case, the ball wasn't particularly sitting up, just something else altogether. Let's move on to the bowlers, Southey and Bolt. So halfway through the Super 12s, we've seen that so far this has been a World Cup for bowlers more than usual. I think we thought there might be a case beforehand. And certainly the new ball dudes are the ones who are completely on top. Handy for New Zealand then to have a pair of them as lethal as Trent Boult and Tim Southee. And it's certainly been the case so far in this tournament. Today was the Boult show. He took 3 of the first 4 wickets to fall. And Sri Lanka were 8 for 4 inside 4 overs. And it was game over at that point. Boult would end up finishing with 4 for 13. He popped back up later to take the wicket of Darsan Shanaka, the captain. And you know, it left him with figures of 6 for 37 from the 8 overs he's bowled in the tournament so far. But of course, they don't just have him. They also have his mate, Tim Southee, who had to settle for only 1 wicket today. That of Nasanka, which was, of course, the one that started it off. But Sri Lanka still couldn't score off Southee. He ended up with just going for 3 runs and over at 1 for 12 from his 4. In fact, Southee was so effective in his last game against Australia, he only managed to bowl 2.1 overs before the Australians were bowled out. So in his 2 games now, he has 4 for 18 from 6.1 overs. And I'm pretty sure, I can't remember the exact number, but I'm pretty sure he's at one stage he bowled 13 consecutive dot balls in this World Cup across the 2 games. I know. All right, let's go. Actually, let's just play a quick video of the bowling today from the 2 seamers.
Oh, very close indeed, and given straight away. God, there's an edge there as well. That'll be. And there's another little inside. Slower and gone. He's about to finish his spell with 4 for, I think. He can.
And there's Ish Sodhi in there as well for no reason at all. But you know, brilliant bowling from the 2 of them today. I actually thought at one stage that that pitch might favour the Sri Lankan bowlers a little bit more. And about 8 minutes into the innings, that was not the case. All right, let's move on to the Sri Lankan fielding collapse. Dual collapses today. There was obviously a time in this game where Sri Lanka was completely bossing the game. They opened with their spinners. Probably because at this point their seamers are a collection of open wounds, and it worked. Throw in a loose shot from Williamson against Rajitha, and the Kiwis were in all sorts of problems. That didn't stay though, and part of the reason it didn't stay, although what they get them, they were 15 for 3, and at the end of the power play, 25 for 3. And in the first over after the power play, Hasaranga got Phillips to lob one up to the boundary rider, Nasanka, who dropped an absolute sitter. Phillips was on 12 at the time. This was not the only time that he was dropped. Later on, Karunaratne was bowling to him when he sliced a drive to Shanaka again, who shelled what was a tough, but let's be honest, a fairly gettable chance. That on its own is bad enough. But there was also the fact that they started defending way too early. They had New Zealand on the brink, and they just really started to let them knock the ball around to defensive fields. But also, there were just so many errors. In that 7th over, they dropped Phillips. Then in the 8th over, there was a free hit because of a no ball. So an error there. The free hit was hit out to Hasaranga, who fumbled the catch and allowed another run. And then Lahiru followed up the next ball with a wide. It was just like that over and over again. And all the tension just went out of the match at this point. And despite the fact that Sri Lanka had completely earned it. But I just want to do a special shout out to Rajitha here. This is great. I like this. There was a moment really early on, I think, that said a lot about him. He did bowl really well, the replacement seamer, who, and for him to bowl well, it's a huge effort because not that long ago, like a couple of weeks ago, he was in Colombo playing a first-class match where the first 2 days were rained off. So I suppose other than the rain, he had no actual preparation for this World Cup. So to come back and take 2 for 23 was a great effort because he wasn't expecting to be in this World Cup like at all at that point. And he did have a moment where I thought, oh my God, this is all going to come crashing down for him. He bowled the good early overs. He came back on later and he bowled back-to-back no balls. And then it looked like the entire thing was going to fall apart for him. but he actually still pulled it back very well. So great, I'm not even supposed to be here vibes from him, but brilliant effort all in. I'm just going to take a quick break, and we'll play an ad here, and then after the ad, we'll do a little bit more, and then we'll get to your questions.
If you love the language of cricket and want more, then head over to the 99.94 app, and you can hear all of our podcasts and cricket commentary. We're adding new shows all the time and covering cricket series from all over the world. Be the first to hear all of our announcements by following us on social media at 9994DM. Welcome to Cricket's Conversation.
Okay, let's get to the second Sri Lanka collapse show, the batting collapse. You could forgive Sri Lanka if they're not enjoying this tournament as much as other teams. They were beaten by Namibia on the first day of qualifying, re-qualifying, or the first round, whatever we're currently calling it. Literally, at this point, it feels like someone is going around, doing attacking all their fast bowlers to get them injured. They've had to go from Geelong to Hobart to Perth, now Brisbane. You can see we've got the map here. That is just ridiculous travel schedule. And then, of course, they turn up and they have to face Tim Southee and Trent Boult in very good form with a spicy kookaburra ball under lights on what is not an ideal pitch. Spicy kookaburra could also be a fusion Australian Sri Lankan dish, I believe. But they were chasing 168, which was too many. They should never have been chasing that many. They did drop Glenn Phillips twice. That's why they were chasing 168. But it was always going to be stiff. But Sri Lanka's top order, it was just gone in the first 2 overs. It was brutal how quickly it was. By the time the power play was done, their number 7 was batting. Sri Lanka's top 4 appeared to be trying to, give some sort of coded emergency. It was 0-4, 0-4 was their scores. Mostly the Sri Lankans were just in trouble, I think, is what they were trying to tell us. And with they were 8 for 4 after 3.3 overs, and just never a good place to be in. For now, though, at least Sri Lanka will be staying in Brisbane with their next match against Afghanistan. I would say that collapse has probably meant that their tournament is over. I haven't looked at the full points table before I come on, sorry. But we thought that they were a sneaky chance of slipping in, but they're just not quite that good. And I think when they look good, people have at times overrated them a little bit. But realistically, they haven't been that good consistently. And I think that's been caught out here. That doesn't mean that they can't still press. This is still a very interesting group with what happened to England and I suppose what happened to Australia as well. So there's still things there. But at the moment, I'm not sure their batting looks good enough against the top level bowling attacks to be consistent. And as I said in the qualifiers, I'm not sure their batting was particularly good in that game either. Anyway, that's the end of that. During the Sri Lanka's batting, something else actually happened. As the innings started, Glenn Phillips was on the bench, struggling with cramp. It was clear that he had some sort of an issue with cramp even when the game was going on. As a cramper, I certainly know how it feels and how silly you think you are for not being able to go out with just what is a cramp. So Glenn Phillips, you could see him stretching off the field and he decided to go out. And I fully support him trying to go out on the ground, especially when he didn't have to. However, this is what happened.
Covered some ground as well. Yep. I think both have gone.
Double Hemi. It's a double Hemi. Oh, he's gone. Got the wobbly boot.
A bit of midnight oil there dancing, Mr. Jarrod.
Yeah. Yep. Normally when you go double hamstring, then you go to stretch him and you go in the quad as well. Oh. Oh, there he goes.
It's like from the grassy knoll, wasn't it? And yep, off he goes. Guptill back on. And fair enough to rest away, get the salts in. He's dead.
As someone who's been through that so many times in my life, it's terrible. My favorite bit though is after he has the third spasm. So he kind of seems to have it in his hamstrings, and then what quite often happens when you have it in your hamstrings, if you have it in both, which I think is what was happening, he then had it in his quaddy as well, which means the back of his leg and the front of his leg essentially went into spasm, which is what made him go. But right after that, he then puts his arms out as if to say, where should I be in the field right now? When the actual answer should have been, you should not have been on the field, Glenn Phillips. You had done your work. Remarkable scenes there. Anyway, let us move on to recycling and cold sandwiches. India might be cruising through the T20 finals at this stage, but it hasn't all been plain sailing off the pitch. Reports emerged following India's training camp in Sydney that the build-up for their match with the Netherlands, that they were unhappy with the food that they were provided with. Apparently, that is because they were offered cold sandwiches, and they were also offered fruit and falafel. And there were some players who went to order food online. An anonymous source. I love that it's anonymous. This is the kind of story you usually get more in the World Cup. And really, outside of Pakistan, Mr. Bean, I think we've actually missed a few of these stories so far. But an anonymous source apparently said that they were decided to speak out on behalf of other teams, not in a position to raise their voice. Mind you, I'm completely with them. Cold lunch. Come on now. I hate cold lunches. And also, you've just been out there training. I think we can do better. It could be worse, of course. They could be having the same food that everyone has to eat at Headingley. Or if you remember back, there was a very good story, and I can't remember what series it was, but Ishant Sharma was at the Gabba, didn't like the food, went outside the ground to get some food, and in true Australian cricket ground style, they wouldn't let him back in with outside food, despite the fact it was Ishant Sharma. So yeah, we do have those sorts of things. There's been another interesting one that Charlie picked up here, is that while the ICC have been pushing their crick toss, is that what they're called? Crick toss? Be crick toes, wouldn't it? But it looks like crick toss, which is their NFTs. You can get an NFT of Chris Wokes' caught and bowled against Afghanistan. I haven't looked at the current price, but I don't think it'll cost you a lot. But they've also found time to do something truly remarkable. Spectators through this World Cup have been encouraged to recycle their plastic in special machines dotted around the ground. That's good news. I'm sure we'd all agree. We should be recycling more, all those sorts of things. The machines themselves are sponsored by the tournament sponsor, Aramco, the Saudi Arabia oil company, who is, I think, the biggest company in the world at the moment, and also the single greatest contributor to global carbon emissions of any company in the world since 1965. I believe they have somewhere around 4% of the world's emissions since that point. But I'm sure that, making sure that these cans and plastic bottles are put away efficiently is saving the world. Anyway, that's all we have for the World Cup mood board here. I'll have a look at your questions. We'll flash up an ad, and then on the other side, I'll start answering them. But thanks again, and line up any questions that you have. And here's another 99.94 ad.
You're listening to Cricket's Conversation on 99.94. Whatever your team, we have the show for you on podcast, YouTube, or on the 99.94 app. We have India, England, South Africa, West Indies, and now Sri Lanka covered. If you want to find us, the best way is to follow us on social media at 9994DM by downloading the 9994 app or Google 99.94 on podcast. We speak cricket.
Beautiful. Let me just tell my sons that I'm recording to be quiet. Sorry, everyone. Could have done that during the ad, but of course they got loud at the end of the ad. All right, who we got here? Vamasab says, do you think New Zealand are a batting around a short, Bracewell instead of Sant Nasodi? I think I mentioned that in the show, actually. I think you answered that before I recorded. Yeah, yes. They really respect Santner's batting, to be fair. And so I think with that in mind, it's not as big an issue for them as perhaps it might be for others. But yes, I think you could make a very good case that they could change up. That's what I think. Even if you look outside the squad, someone like Mark Chapman, they have a very capable backup batter. They have Milne as a very capable backup seamer as well. They even Guptill, if they had to bring him back in. So I do think that there's a few different options there that they can come back in with. But yes, Bracewell will be very interesting. I still think they like Sodhi, though. He takes so many wickets. Bracewell isn't going to give them those wickets, so it's probably just depending on what they're looking for. Seamus says, I think Zimbabwe will beat Bangladesh. I just can't see Bangladesh batters making any more runs against those paces in Australian conditions. Very, very good call. I think neither of those teams, unless Raza does something spectacular, are probably high-scoring teams. So I think from that perspective, it could be a very interesting game. And don't discount the Bangladeshi seamers as well. You know, Tuscan Ahmed and Mustafiza certainly capable of doing some damage back to Zimbabwe. But I haven't looked at the odds. I would assume Bangladesh are the favourites, but they shouldn't be favoured by very much in that game. So I think you're right. I think it's a good matchup for Zimbabwe, all things considered. However, I kind of worry that both teams are going to bat at a similar level. So it might just be the bowling that does it. And, you know, I like Zimbabwe's bowling slightly more than Bangladesh's. So if that's the case, maybe I'm favouring them as well. Tom says, what do you think of tactic opening with slow swing drifters like Watt and Tikshana? Yeah, I find that really interesting. So if those didn't see, I almost did a section on it today on Tikshana's first ball that just sort of drifted in, but it was a swinger, but just very slow. It was like, I suppose, like an arm ball, except traditionally for an off spinner, an arm ball would swing away, whereas this one swung in. We are seeing fewer and fewer swing bowlers. So at this World Cup, who would you say is a genuine swing bowler at the start? I suppose Namibia had a couple. Bhuvi would be another one. Markadere would be another one. I'm sure Shaheen Afridi would be another. There aren't that many genuine swing bowlers. And part of the reason is there aren't as many swing bowlers in cricket at the moment because of the wobble ball and bowlers chasing that delivery. In the past, my big question always was, especially when you use spinners or part-timers for your first over, you only have the ball swinging for like 3 overs. So you want to get it to swing as much as possible. Now that there aren't as many swing bowlers around, and certainly not dominating the way that they used to, having someone like Mark Watt or Tikshana bowl these other kinds of balls kind of makes sense because you're still making good use of the ball moving. And if you don't have Adair or Bhuvi or Shaheen Afridi in your side, then it actually, I think, makes a lot of sense to give that ball to someone else who can still move it in the air. Because you really, again, all these things are about maximizing your advantages. And I think that does maximize the advantage. I don't think there are many... I could be wrong. I don't think there are that many bowlers out there, Tom, that do that. Imad Wasim is probably another one that comes off the top of my head, but I don't think there are that many at this stage. The Lanka strike rate in the power play is under a run a ball in T20 internationals. Do you think he's still valuable to a team like Sri Lanka for his ability to anchor the innings? Well, I mean, I don't think their batting lineup is particularly solid. And I think I can't remember now, but I think their average runs per wicket is around 20. You know, if there's a team that you're looking for that actually has a that needs a anchor, you may be talking about Sri Lanka from that perspective. So I suppose from that area you do, but you don't need anyone scoring at less than a run a ball in the power play. But that's probably why he's there. I think it's also a Kusal Mendes thing, isn't it? They want to match him up with Kusal Mendes because Kusal Mendes is so good against spin. The idea being that Nasanka will take down the pace. It's just not happening for him, especially, as you say, I haven't looked at his domestic numbers because they might be a bit more illuminating. But if your numbers are correct, then it's just not happening the way that they would want it to be. So you wonder now if it's worth changing, but they were 8 for 4 today. You could see why they would want an anchor at the top of the innings. Rika says, do you think Shanaka is the right captain for Sri Lanka? Well, I mean, for those who don't know, he's captain of Sri Lanka, basically, almost, I mean, by accident is the wrong term. But, you know, that there was huge problems between the board and the players, and he was willing to, you know, go on the side of the board at a time when no one else was. He was made captain. I mean, I probably haven't talked about this enough, although I'm going to try and do a podcast with Mark from Sri Lanka on 99.94 soon. But kind of since Durham, everything's been crazy in Sri Lankan cricket. And I mean, that's not particularly new, but I mean, like a lot went on. It's been a really interesting period of good and bad things happening. And I think with that in mind, Sri Lanka is the Tim Payne of the Sri Lankan team. I don't think he's a brilliant tactician, but remember that is one we focus like 90% of our energy on that. That's like one small part of captaincy. And today, certainly their tactics weren't particularly good. Although, I don't know if they had another captain who would have changed things out there. But they let the game drift in a way. They let the game drift in a way that you see a lot from associate teams, where they get in front and instead of going all in, they just completely pull back and just be like, oh, okay, we've done the damage now. The damage will do the rest of the damage for us. The problem with that is that you've got Daryl Mitchell and Glenn Phillips at the crease. They can eventually overcome that original damage. And I think that's probably what happened today. Let's see. C Square says, I feel despite all the positives, New Zealand is still too heavily reliant on the pair of Southey and Bolt to have an impact. Are there any New Zealand pacers that can field their boots once they're done? Well, Milne's there and thereabouts. Jameson and Ferguson. I mean, pretty good backups, if we're being honest. I'm not too worried about... I mean, it's different. And, there might be teething issues and there will be injuries and all those sorts of things. But they've got a lot of seam bowling talent around there. I'm not too worried about that from a New Zealand perspective. Ruban says, can New Zealand go all the way? They can go all the way to the semi-finals or the final. See, that joke, we have to update that old New Zealand joke, which was, we'll see you in the semi-finals. Now it's, I suppose, we'll see you in the final, which is better. Look, anyone who I said this about India maybe yesterday, or maybe Sri Lanka the day before, I can't remember now. Anyone who makes the semi-finals is a very good chance of winning this tournament, based purely on the fact that T20 is a random thing. So even if you are not the favored team, you still have a very good chance in 2 knockout games of getting things to go your way. Australia was not the best team in the last World Cup, right? And so from that perspective, there's absolutely no doubt. So yes, I don't think there's any reason why New Zealand can't win this tournament. They've only played 2 games though. So at a certain point, we're going to need to see more of them. But yes, they've got very, very good chance. I mean, I don't know what their chances are of qualifying, but I would have thought after beating Sri Lanka, they must be, over 70% chance of qualifying? I should have checked. Freddie Wild's been updating those odds, but they're a huge chance of qualifying. And because of that, that means that they're a huge chance of winning this tournament. That's kind of how it works. Let's see what else we've got here. Rahul says, who's the best power play spinner in the world? Is Tikshana right up there? Yeah, I suppose the answer to that is probably Rashid Khan. He's probably the best spinner in any area. I haven't done the numbers on power play spinners recently. I thought it was a really good move bowling him there, though, today. I don't think New Zealand would have expected that. Partly, it's probably just because there was no seamers left, so they had to use their spinners up top. I actually thought Dhananjay De Silva bowled beautifully as well. That wicket to Conway. Conway's a great player against off spin, and he was completely done on that ball. He just looked lost against it. So I thought that was really good bowling as well. But yes, there's no doubt that Tikshana would be up there. I'm trying to remember anyone else off the top of my head that has spectacular numbers. No, it might be one I might have to look at in the future, Rahul. But I think when Ashwin bowls up there, I think he has very good numbers. But the last time I checked, I thought Rashid Khan might have still been at the top. Shadab Khan used to have really good numbers there, but I don't think he bowls there as much as he used to. And Yasir Shah used to have really good numbers there as well. So there's obviously quite a few. Imad Wasim, Samuel Badri, kind of going back a little while, of course. Shramana says, what do you think of how common T20 hundreds are becoming? Is there any way of having a T20 double hundred in our lifetime? Well, I don't know how old you are, and I don't know what your personal health is like. But yes, I would say there's a very good chance of seeing a double hundred in your lifetime. I haven't looked at the rates of hundreds to see if they're going up. This is a low-scoring World Cup, so it'd be a weird time to have a look at that sort of thing. But you might be right. But yes, there's a very good chance of us seeing a double hundred in our lifetime. We've already seen Gale go close-ish. I'm sure someone's already put it in the comments that Rakeem Cornwall did it in a club game not that long ago. When that would be, I don't know, and whether T20 still exists. There's also when the hybrid pitches come in, or even forget the hybrid pitches. If we ever get to synthetic pitches, I think there's even more chance of us seeing those sorts of things. But certainly, as it currently stands, I would say that if you're not 98 with a and a long-term smoker, you have a very good chance of seeing a double hundred in your lifetime in T20 cricket. Robert says, how competitive do you think the USA team will be in the 2024 World Cup? We don't know exactly what the makeup is going to be, of course. I'm not sure how many of the old boys are going to be playing. But I'm not expecting them to be a team that is pushing for, anything. But I think that I've watched them play a little bit. They played well against Ireland. I saw them play some good cricket against Scotland. I saw them play against someone else. There's some players there that put them in a good position. They have the ability to be a team with a similar level of talent to Namibia, and then be able to sprinkle through some really good players, like someone like Aaron Jones, and the opener whose name I've forgotten, Stephen. What's his name? Like even some of their local players, I just think they might have a little bit more batting talent available than some of the associates we've seen coming through. I'm not as excited about their bowling at the moment, but they have some interesting bowling talent, having watched the minor leagues, that some random sorts of bowlers coming through, which could be quite interesting. But yeah, no, there's absolutely no doubt that there is, they could be an interesting side. But yeah, I assume, they're going to be fighting for, if they got 2 wins, they'd be ecstatic with that. 2024 is way too early. They've just started investing all this money and time and effort into cricket over there, and they still have huge problems with administration within America. So it is a bit like that. They're having to overcome quite a bit. Sorry, everyone. I'm going to go through all that again because I muted it. So you can read Jankier's question, which I've now done. Okay, so I wrote the piece about the balls and made a video about the balls and how they're not doing how they're doing a lot more. And so white balls are certainly dominating in a way that they haven't before. Fine. There's been two sides to this from the upper managements of cricket, from what I can tell. One is, this is interesting, we should actually pay more attention to this and get involved with this. And the other one is, that's just for nerds, no one cares. Kind of, maybe nerds is the wrong way, but that's not something that we necessarily have to worry about, right? I wonder if you're marketing tournaments and there is noticeably less 4s and 6s and it becomes an issue, whether that actually then becomes a bigger issue for that side of people. At the moment, it's just for us caring about, right? People who hang out on this channel and are on Cricket Reddit and those sorts of people, right? People in my Discord channel. From this perspective, if it actually gets to the point where there aren't as many 4s and 6s being hit, that's when I wonder if the cricket boards get back involved in that. But yes, I think it makes more interesting cricket, but that's probably not necessarily how that goes. Just see what else we have here. Frederick says, Dick Shannon was bowling just over 100 kilometres an hour, around the same pace Karun Ratney bowled. Yeah, so Sri Lanka went with a lot more slower balls than New Zealand did, but partly that's because New Zealand didn't have to go to slower balls because their on-pace balls were doing fine. There was a period where Glenn Phillips missed 2 slow balls in a row, and one seemed to hit something on the pitch and roll, and the other one reacted weirdly as well off the surface. I think Sri Lanka weren't wrong in doing that. So I think if the game had gone more normally, I think New Zealand would have done it as well. Tikshana's a little bit different because what he was bowling, especially when he was bowling with the newer ball, he was probably trying to get the ball a little bit through a little bit more to get it to skid, to get it to swing in the air, all those sorts of things. I'm not sure if, you've talked about the boundary being shorter on one side. That might have been a part of it as well. But I think that for Sri Lanka, quite early on, their slower balls did seem to have a little bit of an effect, and they went with them. Perhaps they went with them a little bit too much, more than they needed to. I'm not sure. Jay says, KRL's not scoring. Is he bad or is it just form? He's not bad. He's a fantastic cricketer. I mean, look at his numbers in the IPL. The ability to score that many runs at the sort of strike rate he's done. I don't always like the way he plays. I think old KL Rahul is better than current KL Rahul. I think he's a sliver below the very top level Rohit Sharma, Virat Kohli level batting talents. And I think that if you are below them and your form wavers, it just feels like Indians fans are going to blow it out of the water over and over again. I did that video where when he failed 4 times in a row or something, everyone was like, drop him. Failing 4 times in a row, or 5 times in a row, I think it was actually, in T20 cricket, it's nothing. It's nothing. And then you have a look at that, and it was whatever it was, 20 or 30 times in a row. He'd scored double figures before that. I think he's fantastic. I still wish he would bat the way he did when he was with RCB originally. I've been really disappointed with that, and I understand the many reasons why he hasn't, internal and external pressures. But I think he's a fantastic player. But he's not Virat Kohli or Rohit Sharma. He's just not at that level. Please see, Sky fails once playing an attacking shot, and you start to get questions, should he play like that all the time? You get Rishabh Pant, people questioning him for ages until he became really good. And it's like, are you guys watching what I'm watching? Ajinkya Rahane, all these players, right? They are normal, good quality players, and most other teams would just accept them, for the sort of players that they are. Faf du Plessis and Ajinkya Rahane, look at the different treatment that those 2 players got. Very similar level players, I would have thought. I'm talking about in Test cricket. You do, it's hard to be an Indian player and not be at that absolute elite, consistent level. It's almost like the old Australian level, I find, where if you're not a once in a generation Australian player, everyone's kind of looking to see when it's going to fail, when you're going to fail. And in India, it's if you're not, anointed, everyone's like looking for all the problems within your game. But I think he's fantastic. Just see if I've got anything else here. Frederick says, why was Karuna Ratner in at 6? I'm glad you brought this up. When I first saw it, I wasn't sure if it was him. I was a bit confused by that as well. I don't think he was out there as a pinch hitter. I think they were trying to give the hitters to come, a break. You don't want, we see this sometimes, don't we, where you might push up someone like Ashwin. I'm trying to think of another team that does it as well. But we have seen in occasions where, you might throw up Ashton Agar or someone like that in that sort of a situation, just because, they can knock it around for 20 balls, take that steam out of the game, and then you get your hitters back in. So I wondered if it was going to be something like that, but I'm not 100% sure there. Let's see. Why don't we finish with a Milan question? Sanjay says, the Milan case for England is very interesting. He seems to score runs only in the last game of bilateral series and struggles versus spin. Is he England's best number 3? Should they go with an extra bowler? So I think if Owen Morgan was still here, I don't think we'd see Dawid Milan. But I do think, especially now, you need a player like him in the side, because this is turning into more and more of the, look at Mitchell's innings today. didn't make any runs, but he allowed Phillips to be Phillips. And again, we keep seeing this over and over again. These weird, dodgy... Sometimes there's a guy who can't hit the ball, ends up being almost as useful as the guy who's smashing it everywhere in these games. My only question with Milan is he's not Owen Morgan or Kane Williamson or Virat Kohli or... he's not even like a Kusal Mendes level batting talent, right? He's a very good professional player, but not an uber talented player. He's just worked out to get the most out of his game. He's very good at gaming cricket, and I don't mean that in a bad way, because that's a brilliant skill to have, especially as a high level professional. So I wonder if he fits perfectly in that situation. Having said that, even if you're not a Milan fan, and there's certainly, there's a lot of them out there, I think at this stage, the kind of batter he is probably still very important to England in this tournament. I'm not sure they specifically need an extra bowler ahead of that, being that they have enough bowling options in the lineup already. And then you have the ability with Milan, if things go wrong, you do have what we just talked about with Jamaica coming up the order, and Mitchell innings, and I don't know, the Finch innings, Shan Masood innings, the Virat Kohli innings, maybe both Virat Kohli innings. I mean, there's just been heaps of them. Craig Irvine innings, right? Just all the way through the tournament, these guys are knocking the ball around, and then everyone else scoring at the end. And that seems to be how this tournament's going. If that's the case, it's like a Dawid Milan style of tournament. So he should do okay. But yes, as a general rule, he wouldn't have been in my 11 for England. I might have brought him in the squad just because they didn't have Joe Root and Owen Morgan available, and because he plays that spot, just in case you needed it. And at the moment, I don't know, maybe they're going to have to score pretty quick from here on in, aren't they? There's run rate issues, there's points issues, there's all sorts of things for them. So, they might move on from him and try something else. But I can understand why he's here. Anyway, thank you again to everyone for joining us on the show today. Great questions, really enjoyed it. We've got a lot of games tomorrow. We've got Bangladesh, Zimbabwe, Netherlands, Pakistan, India, South Africa, if I can read my handwriting correctly. So we've got 1 in Brisbane, 2 and 2 in Perth. I think that's all right. Hopefully we won't get any rain, although I have heard there might be some around in Brisbane, but hopefully we don't get any rain. We'll be here every day of the World Cup, as we have been every day of the World Cup as well. We also, I've had the chance to make a couple of, so far I've had the chance to make one other video, which hopefully will be up in the next few hours. But I think a lot of you might like it, is probably the best way of putting it. But go out and check out 99.94. We've got so many different podcasts doing so many different shows over and over again. Check them all out. Subscribe, all that sort of thing. Press the bell icon for here. And as it is, we'll see you again tomorrow.